Hello, everyone. My name is Henry Kamsky. I'm currently located in Mountain View, California, and I represent Samsung Content and Services Organization, which, in cooperation with Unity, has organized this webinar. Prior to the start of this webinar, I would like to quickly cover the housekeeping items and basically would like to let you know that you're welcome to ask your questions during the webinar. Please send them to the Q&A box at the end of the webinar, and we'll be happy to answer. Also, if you have encountered any technical issues, please let us know using the Q&A box, and we will assist you right away. I'd like you to be aware of the fact that this session is being recorded, and the video and the slides will be posted, and we will provide you with the link for the webinar video. And finally, we will welcome your feedback at the end of the session. You will receive the survey, and it's very important for us to hear from you and get your opinion about the style of presentation and overall quality and the content. So please fill out the form and let us know what you think about this presentation. I would like to briefly introduce you to this webinar and not take a lot of the time because the main content will be presented by a wonderful person, Oscar Clark. I would like to start with explaining that Unity and Samsung are behind this webinar, and the importance of this knowledge is quite critical. This slide that you can currently see basically demonstrates that two market leaders are working together for the benefit of the developers. Obviously, we are focusing on all size developers, but the greatest community right now is independent developers, which we have currently close to 5 million developers using Unity development engine and multi-platform system. And of course, it's not a secret that Samsung is a worldwide market leader with mobile ecosystem. So together, two companies are working hard to bring the knowledge and success to the independent developers. I personally have been involved with indie developers for the last year in the capacity of a program lead where we developed promotional programs that benefit independent developers and specifically game developers. The importance of providing this help is tremendous. A lot of indie developers are rushing to market, are trying to publish their content, and sometimes they make certain mistakes. And we are trying to help our developers through our developer program, through our expertise, through our webinars and technical events. And also, I would like to emphasize that everyone is making mistakes, which is not a problem. The main issue is how to get the right information, take time, fix the mistakes, and use the knowledge provided by both companies, by Samsung and Unity, in order to successfully launch the application in the marketplace. We're not going to bore you with a lot of bullet items, but I would like to say that I just came back from the E3 event where I judged the independent game competition, and I came to realization that the miscalculations and mistakes are quite common among the larger community of the developers. So the importance of successfully launching the app is obviously a number one priority for every independent developer. However, I can tell you that generating the game downloads do not always translate into the successful monetization. And the subject of this webinar is quite critical for most of the indie developers I communicated in the last year. So please listen to Oscar Clark, the authority on this subject, the person who is behind the webinar, who is a Unity evangelist. And I would like to let him introduce you to this important subject and tell you about the 7 rules of monetization. Oscar, please take away.
Thanks, Henry. That's great. Hi, guys. I hope some of you've heard of me before, but as Henry has mentioned, I'm an evangelist at Unity. I've been involved with games for the last 20 or so years. We think that I was one of the first people ever to put mobile in-app purchase live. We think, we can't prove it, around 2003, the Mobile Operator 3, which I was running the games platform for, had the first rent games. It was a complete disaster. I'll explain all those things later. And that's really to the point Henry said earlier. We learn through experimentation and failure and learning from data. And these rules, these 7 rules that I've put together for you, are really about giving you guidelines to help you avoid some of the mistakes that I've seen happen over the last 20 years. It's not just about free-to-play, but it obviously is very influenced by free-to-play, because a lot of the most advanced monetization techniques are being done by game developers who are experimenting in that free-to-start kind of model. But even if you look at downloadable content, there's some really interesting experiments going on there. So it's a real privilege to be invited by Samsung to be able to give this talk. Please ask me questions. I'm gonna occasionally test your pulse to see if you've got kind of an idea or you agree with what I'm saying or not, and hopefully we can go through from there with you asking questions as we go along. So the process we want to start with is to break down these rules and try and give you some of the evidence, the understanding that form that particular rule. The first one is utility. Have we all heard of that term before? I'm going to put a pulse check. Have you heard of the term utility before? So it's an economics term. Anyone heard of it or not heard of it? If you could answer the pulse question, that'd be really helpful. Is that coming through? Oh, okay. So we've got quite a few people saying they haven't heard of it. So essentially, it's a term that it's not about the object itself. So if I buy a t-shirt, it's not about the value of the components that make up the t-shirt. It's what the t-shirt says about me. So the fact that I'm wearing a Unity t-shirt tells you that I'm a member of the Unity team, and that has a social cachet. It has an expectation of value associated with it. That utility is almost like a verb. It's not a noun. It's something that has movement in it. And when you think about players, we have to think about their value and not the value of downloading the game. No one values the download process itself. They have the expectation of delight, the expectation of future value, you could even say, which is about the experience that they're planning to get, what they're hoping to get. In fact, the interesting thing about it from a psychological point of view is that we don't even have to have that expectation delivered. Merely experiencing the expectation is where the value lies. Now, that's not me trying to suggest you do anything shady, but I want to try and get you to think about the experience that the players expect as being a central part of everything you're going to do in terms of monetization design. And through monetization design, we can be more effective at delivering experiences that the players care about. I find it useful to break down a game into 3 stages. The mechanic, the thing that we repeat, the kill loot level, I find a picture, I place it in a pattern, I then resolve that pattern, I succeed. I build a farm, I place the crop, I harvest the crop, I take the resource and plant the crop again. Whatever the game is, there's a repeatable core mechanic. A lot of people call it core mechanic. And that mechanic is really important to be replayable, because that replayability makes the sort of systems that make it easy for us to generate revenue opportunities. And the point about this is we should be looking at revenue opportunities as the way of keeping track of how successful our game is, because if we're generating revenues, we're doing that through generating utility. That's our focus, the value proposition. I have another quick question. Does any of you guys think free to play is so? Do you think free to play is good? I press the green thumbs up, or do you think free to play itself is inherently bad? Put the red thumb down. Anyone have any views on that? This will really help me understand the mindset of, because I have different audiences. Some are very, very pro free to play, and it's easier to talk about it in different ways than if you have an audience who happens to maybe be a bit skeptical about it. Cool. Okay, so I'll leave that running as I carry on talking about this process, though. So the mechanic is the starting point. The reason why we carry on playing that mechanic, the sense of purpose and progression, if you like, is what I call the context loop. The context loop might be my ongoing competitiveness with you, or a clan system, or whatever else. Although I tend to think of clan system as part of the metagame. It could be about a narrative arc. It could be about a whole range of things. But it's the reason why we don't just play the game once. It's the reason why we might play the game 5, 6, 7, 8 times, maybe 100 times, maybe over 100 days, playing it 5 to 10 times a day. Well, when we get to that kind of scale, then we really are talking about the kind of game that can be sustainable, and that's the kind of engagement we're looking for. The metagame, for me, is the things that aren't the pixels. It's the collaborative system, it's the achievement system, it's the longer term engagement processes, but it's also about deeply understanding the mode of use of your game and the devices that the players are using to do that. The kind of gameplay we create for a game that's basically going to be played while you're sat on the toilet is very different from the kind of game we're going to make when we're going to spend like 6 hours sat at a console. So the way that people play has a very profound impact on the way that we think about the game design itself. So what we've talked about so far is, here's a series of ways of slicing up the game, and how do we create expectations of value with that? Well, how does that relate to monetization? Well, I'm going to do that now. I'm going to take you into a kind of way of thinking of monetization that is very much more like game design than maybe you've seen talked about elsewhere. So I'm going to break down the types of goods that we might sell in a game into 4 types, and hopefully from looking at those 4 types you'll see how they relate directly to game mechanics. So here the first type is sustenance. So this is like your energy mechanic. I need this good in order to carry on playing. If I run out of fuel, I can't drive my car. If I run out of health potion, I can't, I can't carry on when I run out of hit points, for example. This idea of sustenance is a quite hard kind of way of creating a good in an experience in a game, because it's all or nothing. I can carry on or I can't. I'm not a huge fan of charging people for energy or sustenance in this way, personally. But I can absolutely see why you might want to do it. In fact, we'll come to some reasons why you might later. But having a consumable good or some other mechanism which allows me, like watching a video ad, that allows me to continue playing, can also be very powerful in terms of reward. So let's think about sustenance as our first type. The second type is the shortcut. So this is, for example, let's say I've got a sword, and the sword, higher power sword lets me get to the end of the game quicker. Fantastic, that's a shortcut. Now, the question there really is the shortcut something which compromises gameplay? And that's something I want you've got to be really careful about. If we start thinking about these types of goods as game design tools, we have to think about balance, because we're thinking about the utility of the player, the expectation of delight. We have to make sure that when we add a brand new amazing Vorpal blade, that there's a good reason for having it. It lets me kill Jabberwockies, for example, but also it doesn't unbalance the whole game. So understanding that these goods are actually design tools changes it. So the first one was obviously sustenance, the second one is shortcuts. The third one is social goods. It's easy to underestimate them, but they're incredibly powerful and they keep coming up time and time again because people absolutely love having something to show off. But if you're going to have something to show off, you need some context in your game that allows you to show other people what's going on. You know, oh, look how great and cool I am because I have these really cool items that you don't have. Well, if they don't see those items, how can I feel good about that? In the particular case here, the screen grab is actually taken from a guy called Toit Vedeman, who's quite a well-known free-to-play designer, consultant, so on and so forth, does some great talks. He does a fantastic talk about his Hello Kitty collection in Puzzles and Dragons, and I happen to love the fact that he's quite a hardcore gamer, but he loves talking about how he spent the time in Puzzles and Dragons to get all of the Sanrio characters. Now, if anyone has played Puzzles and Dragons, you will know to get all of those characters that were in a special offer in that time period, normally a month, is incredibly hard and requires a lot of dedication. So the social capital that comes from seeing somebody who has all those characters in the game is actually really, really amazing. So when we sell people social goods, the value of that isn't just pure gameplay in the traditional sense, but it can have an impact on gameplay because it says something about who we are. The fourth type of good is a strategy good. So in this case, we have an item which adds a new way of playing, and it might be a subtle difference, but it is a new tactic or new strategy of play that changes the gameplay experience for the person who's consumed it. But it can also change the experience for the other people involved too, and has to do so for the betterment of everybody. If I get a new card in Hearthstone, I have a strategy you don't necessarily know about yet. It's going to change the way you play. It's going to affect your gameplay too. But if it's a I win card, what happens? People stop playing the game. So we have to think about all these goods in all these contexts, from the sustenance good, which is about the kind of energy, the kind of ability to carry on playing, the shortcut, which might be the armor that defends us, or the sword that allows us to defeat the boss quicker, the social good and the strategy good. All these four types of good are kind of pretty much cover most of the experiences you might be able to create in a game. But that's not it. It doesn't end there. We also have to think about the way that we deliver them to the player. So, for example, they might be consumable. I'm a massive fan of Golf Clash. I was playing it before we started. I think the Limit guys are amazing and they've done a great job of that game. But they've really focused on delivering consumable items. Now, let's take an example. When I unlock a chest, and by the way, they've used a brilliant technique by the Clash Royale used. In other words, you get your item, you win something, but you have to wait to unlock it, and you can choose to spend money to do it, well, spend currency to unlock it quicker. But even when you do that, when you get a golf club, advanced golf club, you get cards, again, similar to Clash Royale, and those cards, you have to get a certain number of them in order to then upgrade that specific golf club. So it's basically an upgrade card that's consumable. Once I've used it, my club is upgraded. So that idea of consumables is incredibly powerful, and that could apply to a sustenance good, a shortcut good, a social good potentially even, and a strategy good. So you can think about it in all these tools. Another form is capacity. How many consumables of those types can I store? Can I buy more storage? Now that has a particularly important thing if you get a certain number of items per day. If I get a certain number of items per day of a particular consumable, but I've only got storage enough to hold, say, 10 of them, I've got to keep coming back in order to keep getting my 10. And I've got to use those 10 in order to get the value for the things that I've got. So capacity allows the player to have a bit more leeway, and also to be able to have a bit more leverage in gameplay too. So the third form of good is a generator. Now, a generator is a bit kind of like the opposite of a capacity. A generator means I get more of that consumable every day. So think about what that means. Is if I'm playing a game and I normally get enough fuel for 10 races, but I buy a generator, I can now race 10 times a day. Sorry, 20 times a day. Generator will give you more. So you might default have 10 times. You buy the generator, you now get 20 times a day worth of racing. Now, it doesn't end there, because when I've used up all my races, probably I'm going to want to do more. So I might want to upgrade again. Or I might want to refresh my fuel. Or I might want to buy an even bigger capacity so I can rest between sessions for longer. So generators are incredibly powerful. What the trick about generators for me is, generators are something which are the most valuable earliest in the gameplay, and they keep the player interested for longer periods of time, because once they've spent their money, they're going to get the best value out of spending the money on a generator by keep coming back. So incredibly interesting, especially when you look at the fourth form of a good, the aspiration good. So these are all about items which we look forward to being able to afford, where we're aiming to be able to get this. What's interesting about it, so in this case it's the red Bugatti that was a charity item during the kind of Apple Red period. Now I decided I wanted to buy this. I actually did buy this for $14.99 because it was cool and because I wanted to race it. It was a better car than the other cars I had at that level, that tier. And I bought it, and it was fantastic. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. I didn't expect it to be more than a skin on a car with some better stats. And I was willing to spend the $14.99 in particular because in this case, it's limited edition, but B, so that's the social value, is that I have a limited edition car. And also, it's a charity item. So I'm not just getting an item for its own sake. I'm getting it for charity. I'm getting it for the limited edition status. I'm getting it because it's cool. All of these layers of decision, all these values, these utility aspects start to play their part. And that's why this is all still about utility. Because if we take the 4 types and the 4 forms, we can really think about the effect they have on play and player experience. So let's take sustenance, right? So in this case, you've got fuel as a consumable good. When I run out of fuel, I can't race. I could watch a video ad to replenish my fuel tank once, maybe every 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, whatever. I can then have I could buy a bigger fuel tank, and that means I could store more fuel. But I could also have a generator, which means my fuel would replenish faster. I could also have a better car that uses more fuel but gives me other advantages. Now I love it when your aspiration goods include a little bit of strategy in there, because if I've got only better swords, so if I have sword 1 it's good, sword 2 is better, sword 3 is better still, that's pretty boring, to be honest, because all I ever want is the biggest sword. So just give me the biggest sword, I don't want the rest of them. But if you look at a game like the original Infinity Blade, there were other things going on that made you want to use every single weapon. In the Infinity Blade, the original Infinity Blades example, they gave you bonus experience points, but it was a finite amount of bonus experience points. So once you used that up, you'd stop getting bonuses. So what you did is you went through every single weapon in order to maximise all of the experience point bonus you could get with those weapons. That's smart. So the point is thinking about the utility, and this grid hopefully will give you a kind of sense of ways of thinking smartly through the play of your game, where the monetization opportunities are for that game. Because you're thinking about the utility, you'll be making games that are facing the player's delight, not just trying to find ways to make money. And what we find is that authenticity of focusing on utility actually generates better revenue opportunities. So, I'm a bit confused. My screen went a bit funny. I don't know if you guys saw this slide before or not. Oh, it seems to be the two 2 copies of the slide, that's all. Okay, so there's another aspect of this, just before I come to the end of utility, which is about the role of ads versus IAP. In fact, actually, it raises the question about premium, DLC, in-app purchase, and ads as different techniques. The point is to work out where in the flow of the game is the best opportunity for you and your audience, their willingness to spend money at what points in play, in order to get the maximum utility. If your game is a one-time glorious experience, it's probably not repeatable, and if it's not repeatable, you're probably not going to want to make a pay up front. Sorry, you're not going to want to make a free-to-play game of it. It sounds like a pay up front game if it is a one-time journey. If it is repeatable, then you need to work out where in that flow of the game is right to spend money or not. Is there enough motivation? Is there enough utility? We've talked about those forms and types to help you get a gauge of where you can find opportunities to generate goods, and those goods can then be sold. But also think about ads. Particularly, I'm a massive fan of opt-in ads, because opt-in ads allow us to give the player something back. In fact, we have to actually position why the player will want to watch the ad. As a motivation we have to think about, we have to provide utility to them to watch something optionally. So, for example, if we're in Sonic Dash and we get to the end of our run, or halfway through our run, and we were doing great time, but we made a little mistake, we can actually watch an ad to revive ourselves. But we can't watch the ad every time. And that's important. If we start putting ads in everywhere, we start deteriorating for player utility. If instead we restrict access to ads, say by time or numbers of uses a day, as long as that's focused on player experience, that can actually work in our favour. But it's a weird thing, because I don't want you to think that you can't have lots and lots of ads in a game, particularly opt-in ones. What I'm suggesting is you have to be smart about it. Look at your game and understand where you're exchanging the player's time for money, where you're adding value, where the utility is, and how you can offer the best experience for the player. There's a whole set of conversations, a whole webinar's worth of discussions on the best use of video ads. In fact, I think there's a video somewhere of me doing a talk about that somewhere as well. So I'm not going to go into that in too much detail. Instead, I think we've covered everything you could think about for utility. We're going to move on to Rule 2. Now, don't worry, that's the longest part of the webinar. Utility is really the biggest thing, but there's a lot of other aspects we're going to go through. Obviously, if anyone's got any questions on any of the utility stuff, then please feel free to ask. Rule 2 is anticipation. Now, I'm going to go into a bit of psychology here, particularly actually some stuff that was looked at in the 1960s. A guy called Raymond Barrow, a psychologist, created a kind of paper that was about consumer behavior as risk. So what's that got to do with games, you might ask? Well, actually it is relevant to everything we might ever buy ever. And the basic proposition is people don't like to spend money. Now, it's not quite as good as that. Basically, what they had this idea of buyer anxiety, and the reason we have a buyer anxiety, and we've probably all experienced it at some point, when you're looking at a set of trainers and you're thinking, which one am I going to get? I need some shoes. I need cool trainers. Are these the ones that are going to work for me? Or I'm going to have to buy a service from a plumber. I need to have my boiler fixed. You have uncertainty. You have the uncertainty of the outcome. Will this plumber give me what I want? Will these trainers be comfortable? Will they actually let me run for a 10k without giving me blisters? There's some functional outcomes that we want to understand. But it also, if I didn't get these trainers, or if I didn't hire that plumber, is there another plumber I should have hired? Is there another pair of trainers I should be getting? And equally, and this is less so about the plumber, but will other people think badly of me? If I don't use my friend the plumber and use someone else, he'll be upset with me And the social anxiety caused by that might inhibit my ability to go find someone better. If these trainers don't look cool, will I be happy to put them on and run around the streets of my hometown when I'm trying to get ready for the 10K I'm about to run? Well, actually, that's an important issue. Social issues matter. But they're not the end of it. There are external needs. There are... all of these issues are related to things that we have to do anyway, outside, you know, the decision itself. External pressures. We need to do the washing up today. We haven't got as much money in this month as we did last month. Whatever it might be, there are those external pressures which the person trying to sell something cannot possibly understand. So, can we make people buy anything? In fact, that's a good question. You know, do you think that we can make people buy anything? Anyone got any thoughts on that? If you think we can force people to buy, put a thumbs up. If you think we that there's no way we can force people to buy, put a thumbs down. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to carry on with the next slide as that panel goes. So please, you know, keep answering that panel, that pulse check. So here is the kind of theory that goes around it. So when we have this bar anxiety, what happens is we actually create permission, or rather we allow players or any buyer to give themselves permission to buy, but only if we can give them an expectation of delight, have a call to action. A call to action might be something like buy one, get one free. Ah, there's a motivation. If I don't get this deal now, I'll be missing out. It's a special offer. There's a reason to act. Social capital. What is the context? And if we create aspirational contexts, you know, we have this glitzy video advert for our game. Will people be more likely to be excited by it? And if they will, that's really cool. And therefore, if it's cool, it has more social capital, and therefore it helps people give themselves permission. And the real answer to the question, so we've got 5 people saying yes, we can make people buy, and 3 people saying no, we can't. The reality is we can't in the long run. We could manipulate people in the short run, but that basically backfires on us. And actually, the only things that really work are when we create the conditions where players can make the decision for themselves. That's the most effective way. So actually we can't make people buy in the long run, and making them buy in the short run will often cost us in the long run. It will damage our lifetime value. Now, it's not a hard and fast rule, but what we do know is if we focus on expectation of delight, social capital, and call to action, that will allow the players to give themselves permission, and that's when they go into abnegation. Abnegation is just a fancy way of saying setting aside our other needs. So by thinking about that, what we're saying is actually we want to create the conditions where players make a good decision to buy, not forcing them or manipulating them into making decisions they'll regret later. And if you really want me to go into full detail later on in questions, we can talk about hot-cold empathy gap as well, which is all about making emotional decisions when you're in an emotional state as opposed to logical decisions when you're in a calm state. So that was, I told you it was the quicker talking about these other ones, and obviously utility is a long one. This is the quicker one. Again, the rest of the rules are a little quicker. And again, if you have any questions on anticipation, then please just ask them in the Q&A. Scarcity is my next thing. What's really interesting about scarcity is that some people get really upset about the idea of us using scarcity in game monetization. And the problem with that is that people forget that scarcity is integral to game design. It's literally an absolutely critical part of what makes games games. Because without scarcity of some form, we have no dilemma. If we have no dilemma, there's no decision. If there's no decision, there's no challenge. So it's really kind of critical part. Now, you could argue some action games have very little kind of scarcity per se, but actually they do. I mean, they have time, they have interaction, they have a whole bunch of other aspects. So we can relieve that scarcity by offering a time slowdown, which allows the character to carry on running at the normal rate, but the clock is slowed down, therefore making it feel like they're running faster. There's a whole bunch of techniques like that. So understanding that scarcity is integral means that we have to also understand that time and money are both design tools. So when we think about this, we have to think about our economy. We have to think about positive reinforcement inside that economy. You know, if we start adding a good, does it create a positive feedback loop, or does it create a negative feedback loop? So if I start flooding my game economy with gold by people buying cheap gold, what impact does that have on the game design, on the balance of play? If it affects the speed at which players can get through the gameplay, where they can complete their fantastic cities or whatever else it might be, that's fine, provided we've considered the balance. And who can work out game balance? Game designers. This is why it's so important to have people who understand game mechanics also understanding the monetization, because we need both of those parts of the puzzle to work together in order to deliver utility value for the player without breaking the underlying game economy. Incredibly difficult to balance with some games, and obvious to balance in others. It all depends on the game itself. So consider very carefully your time, money balance, but also it's important to have scarce items, but it's also important that that scarcity is authentic. It feels an integral part of the game. It can be part of the narrative of the game, and no one will have a problem. But we have all probably experienced those games where some random thing happens and it makes no sense why this object is scarce, and you feel like, yeah, they're just taxing me. They just want me to spend money. I'll give you another example of a way to think that can be really positive with this, but it also can be it can be seen as a little manipulative if you don't do it with care. And that's the hot dogs and hot dog roll bun method. Have you heard about the idea that you typically will get 8 hot dogs in a pack, but you'll only get 6 hot dog buns in a pack? So how many packs of hot dogs and hot dog buns do you need to buy to make sure you use them all? And yeah, there is a way of working it out, but it ends up, to get an even balance of both, it's actually quite a lot. So it's one of these things. It's like, think about what the implications are, the shadow you cast by the choices you make in the way you bundle things, the choices you make in terms of how available premium currency might be in gameplay, and how you can do that so that players who will not spend money can still get a good experience by a combination of watching ads and normal play, and the fact that they are there can contribute to us making sure the game is as good as possible for those people who will want to spend money on in-app purchase as well. Next rule is timing. Timing is really important. There's an assumption that when you launch a game that the players are going to be the same and have the same needs all the way through, but they don't. In fact, if you've done it right, your players' needs will change over time, and if you can predict that, if you can actually match their likely behaviour, you can actually increase the revenues of the whole game. And so the way we look at that, at least the way I look at that, I steal from the Gartner hype curve, which is a classic sort of shape. This shape you see here is the Gartner hype curve. I'm using it because of my experience running a mobile operator platform. I looked at the amount of money spent per day based on the number of days since the person had started using their device. So the important thing there is the number of days meant that everybody started at a similar point. So we lumped all the cohort of people together, where they all start at the same point. We ended up with a good comparison of their behaviour over time. And this is the curve I got. People spending a lot of money early on, having a pit of disillusionment shortly after, but then returning, if they carried on playing at all, returning to an established routine of regular spend. So this stuff I've seen for real. But what I've also seen, when you match this to data based on real players, particularly in free-to-play, is that there is the same pattern, but more importantly, that those patterns match into different sections. First section being seeing discovery. At the discovery stage, players really are only interested in do they install or not. We don't really want to get involved in them getting worried about whether they're going to spend money or not, because we don't want to put any barriers in the way. The reason why we don't want to, for most games, going to be freemium if they're repeatable, is because any payment will increase the barriers to them downloading our game. A payment, let's not go into the Hersheys Kisses experiment, but look up the Hersheys Kisses experiment. You'll see that free is very magical, and any money at all is a barrier to access. So essentially, at the discovery stage, all we're interested in is, does this person install the game, and how can we get them started? Once we've got them started, we get into the learning stage. And at the learning stage, we want to be able to understand how to get that player to stay playing as long as possible. They are going to have the worst experience they've ever had in your game, and ever will have in your game, because they don't yet know why they want to carry on playing. They don't know the controls. Of course they're going to have a bad experience unless you work really, really, really hard. And it's not easy. We lose huge percentage of an audience in our first day of play. Something like 40% retention is considered good in mobile. So when we realise that, our job in the learning stage is not to tell people to spend money, although we may get them to do so. Our job in this stage is to show them there is value in spending money, and there is value in carrying on playing. Converting them is not our primary objective. Maintaining their play is our primary objective. And actually, ads can be really powerful for that as well, to be able to give you a taste of what can come when you're ready and you're fully engaged, if you're willing to spend some money. And the engaging stage is the point where people understand the game. They understand what it means to have that +5 Vorpal blade, and why killing Jabberwockies is great fun. They already understand it at the engaging stage, and that's why that's the point where you start seeing an increase in revenues. In fact, it goes further than that, because we also see that people get to the point where we can actually start identifying some of those individuals, not all of them, but some, may have the potential to super engage. Now, we used to use the term whale. I strongly suggest we don't use that anymore. And the reason we shouldn't use it is because it refers to a gambling phenomenon where the player has already decided that their game is roulette or poker or whatever it is, and that they are going to spend X thousands of dollars in a casino in Vegas, and they're going to see how long they can carry on until they run out of money. That is a whale. A whale is not somebody who loves your mobile game and is willing to put, $100 in, $1,000 in, even $10,000 in. The different mindset is about the utility and the expectation of value, not in the excitement of seeing how long you can last. They're very different psychologies. So if we understand that and we focus on utility, we can look at the value, and we can hopefully find people who are willing to super engage. We mustn't forget that we also need to re-engage people. Some people will play, they may never spend any money, but we want to re-engage them, because at some point, if they are engaged, their likelihood of spending money will go up significantly. But actually, the point is that we're getting people to enjoy the game. And the longer we have a community of people enjoying a game, the proportion of people there impacts our likelihood of having the scale to have enough video ad revenue, to have enough in-app purchase revenue, to be able to continue and sustain and build more excitement. And in particular, where the social aspect is, if we're showing other people this great, cool social capital items, well, we need people there to be able to see them, and that contributes to revenue, virality, engagement, etc., etc. But people leave. We churn. We leave. The game comes to an end for some people. They get tired of it. They move on to the next thing. That's life. Get over it. You're not going to keep people forever. Some people will stay on. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's true. And hopefully we'll get enough people staying on to make sure that's sustainable. But we will continuously need to increase new people. But when someone leaves, let's make sure they leave on a high. Let's make sure they leave thinking that we're great and recommending our game to their friends as something that they enjoyed, where they spent money, that they loved the fact that they spent the money. Think about your friends who've spent money on Hearthstone and how they talk about it, as opposed to some of your friends maybe spent money in Candy Crush. In fact, they may not even admit to spending money in Candy Crush, even though they probably have done it. If we can leave people churning, feeling great about it, then actually we've really triumphed, because focusing on utility delivers that value. So we're getting to the last pieces, so we're running out. I'm running out of time. I'm going over a little bit, but let me just make sure that we cover some of the important bits. The rule 5 is repetition. Getting people to play more often, and part of it is about that life cycle we talked about earlier. If we can get more engagement, if we can get people to spend more time playing the game, they will spend more money and they will spend more often. So more people spend more money if they play for longer, and that's been shown time and time again. There was a recent EDAR, was it EDAR? No, sorry, Super Data report with Unity that talked about the increases in revenue on mobile, and how much of that was driven by an increase in longevity of play. So that has a massive impact on people. These particular numbers I'm showing here, it's actually quite old. It's a 2014 survey that we did when I was part of Unity Ads with EDAR, and it was really obvious just how much of an impact repeat play has. But in order to get that repeat play, there are a couple of things you need to pay attention to. Predictable uncertainty is one of them. I'm going to use the Bop It as an example. You know roughly what's going to happen. You don't know which order they're going to press. At the same time as you don't know which order they're going to press, you've got to hold in your mind that order so that you can then repeat that back and then pass it on to someone else. That whole idea of being able to be master of the game, because it's in your hands to remember it, but you're not sure what's happening next. You can get distracted by other people, and you have to pay attention to the whole experience, not just what your next move is. That ability to frame a player's mind beyond just the moment, the mechanic of play, but to look at the whole experience, that's a really powerful technique. And I'm happy to sort of expand upon that. Look at the TV show Columbo and the way that works, or look at the game The Trail and see how that works, and you'll get a sense of what I mean by predictable uncertainty. Purpose and progression, this is the context loop. Again, really important, particularly if you put your friends in there. If you can actually see other people, where they are, how they can contribute to your play, how I can see I've succeeded, that the goal is attainable. If there is constantly new goals, but each goal stage is attainable, we will play for longer, particularly if other people are there. But watch out for player fatigue. If anything that blocks the player, anything that gets in the way of the pulse of frustration and relief, and a lot of ad formats, like interstitials, can block you, and after a while they increase the fatigue. It's really important to get the right balance and position your ads in the right places so that you create relief and relaxation and give people an opportunity to stop playing, which might sound counterintuitive. We want people to stop playing our game, but have a reason to return. So don't let your players fatigue. Give them a reason to return. Give them a chance to break. And what's interesting is when you see people, which games people choose. if I've only got a couple of minutes spare, I'm not going to choose a game that I know has a 15-minute play life cycle. You know, if a session lasts 15 minutes, there's no chance I'm going to play it on a mobile phone. Probably. But if I am on a tablet, I might. So mode of use of the device also plays a big part. Rule 6, evidence. I love data. I can't get enough data. Data drives design. It provides us with a way of looking at games which is about creating a hypothesis, testing it, and learning and moving on. Getting that right, getting good data, planning the design of your analytics, using robust tools, using cohorts that allow you to compare what is genuinely like for like comparing player behavior by the number of days since they first installed rather than by the date they first installed, gives you insight. And what do game developers do with insight? They leverage it. They weave creative solutions. In fact, the problem is that we think about game design as creating mechanics, and that's not the whole of game design. What we do as game designers is solve problems. We're really good at solving problems, and we're also really good at creating them. So if we can identify through data where the problems are, we can solve them in ways that create imaginative opportunities for playfulness. And to know that that is something we'll want to do again and again and again and again. Something where we've got purpose and progression. It's really important to make sure you've got good, solid data. And don't just look at whether someone buys something. Seeing someone converting to play your game and then to pay for something in your game is fine. But if they're not repeat purchasing, why is this not a paid game up front? Because you've failed. If your in-app purchases are not exciting enough to make people want to do it twice, 3 times, 10 times, 100 times, you've completely missed the whole point. Repeat purchase is a stat we don't pay enough attention to. Just because someone spends money does not mean it was good enough. Getting them to spend twice, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, 100 times, that's when we know it's good enough. I'd rather have someone not pay than pay once. Obviously, I'd much rather they spend a lot more, bought a lot, but you know, it's still better to have a free player than one who plays once, because my monetization model is busted if they pay once. This is the last rule, so hopefully we'll be finished in the right time frame. The last rule is this: scale trumps everything. Actually, I hate using the word trump at the moment, politically incorrect. No, scale basically is the biggest hurdle, because scale makes all the difference. If you have a game that scales, free to play is a sensible, useful option. If you have a game that doesn't scale, you're going to find it very tricky, and maybe a paid option is better. It's going to depend on your game. But scale isn't just to get more people in. Can we get more people doing more things more often for longer? There are 4 variables there we can increase to get our scale. Yes, we can get more people. Yes, we can get them to play more often. Yes, we can give them more things that generate revenue opportunities. And we can try to sustain them for longer. And if we change those 4 variables, particularly the longer part, we will increase the potential we have to generate revenue for our game. You don't get more people, or get people to do things more often, or get them to do more things, or get them to do it for longer, unless you are giving them something that they really care about. Unless you are providing them utility, the first rule, this won't happen. You can scale through spending money, but it's incredibly expensive. But if you can scale by making the game focus on the utility and the value, the expectation of delight, and convert that with the techniques we've talked about throughout this webinar, we can then deliver real value that players are happy to spend their time and their money on. So this is the bonus slide. The bonus slide is, when you look at your game, break it down into the mechanic, the context, and the metagame, and then say to yourself, if I put an ad there, would that make it interesting? Would that add value to the player? If I put an ad there in front of an opportunity to spend an in-app purchase, could I do that in a way that increases their willingness to spend? And if I did that in the context loop, is that a better place? Is that complementary? And the same principle applies. If I give them the opportunity to use an ad, can I increase the motivation? Can I get more value for the game, but also create more utility for the player by my smart choice of where I position ads and in-app purchase in the game? You have to make these decisions for your game. I've been really careful not to try and put actual examples, and that's, I think, really, really important. You know your game better than me. If you apply these techniques to your experience, you can make a better game. It doesn't have to be compromise. It doesn't have to be selling your soul to make money. If you focus on making a better game that people want to spend money on, you can do it more profitably and create better experiences at the same time. So that's essentially it. I did say something online, and I don't know if any of you guys saw this. I've got 20 discount vouchers that I'm willing to give to anyone on this webinar right now. All you need to do is reach out to me, with your contact details, and I will send you a voucher code so you can get 10% off a Unity Pro license. It's a 12-month. It's a 12-month license, but if you're interested in that, then just give me a shout. Happy to help you with that. We'll get you the details of how to contact me later. I have one more thing I need to do before I then go into questions. So think about your questions now as I talk about that. Essentially, there's upcoming an event in October, the Samsung Developer Conference, October the 18th and 19th in San Francisco. They're going to open registration in a couple of weeks, and because you've been on this webinar, they've given us a special code for that. If you go to register for that with the code SDP Webinar, you're going to get 50% off your ticket. So if you want to be part of that amazing conference, then check it out, the details. They'll be registering for it shortly. And remember the code SDP Webinar, and you'll get a 50% discount on the ticket for that. So that should be pretty cool. And last but not least, here's my details. So I'm going to try and answer any questions. I think I've got one here at the moment, but obviously please feel free to ask away. There's a question here which says, what would I suggest is a good price for a premium version of a mobile game? At what price do people generally start hesitating? So this is a really massive question, and incredibly important for the premium game area. Now, I think I'm going to go into the Hersheys Kisses example. I'm going to just do a quick pulse check. Who's heard of... Oh, let me end that one. So, who has heard of the Hersheys Kiss experiment? Press your fingers up, your thumbs up if you have heard of Hersheys Kisses, and thumbs down if you haven't. So it looks like most people haven't. So I'll explain it. Cool. So there's Dan Ariely is a psychologist who looks at kind of odd behaviour and sort of predictably irrational behaviour. It's a great book called Predictably Irrational. I thoroughly recommend it. In that book, he talks about Hersheys Kisses. So now let's imagine I give you a Hersheys Kiss, or I can give you a Lindt chocolate. Now, Lindt chocolate is really nice Swiss chocolate. Hersheys Kisses are interesting. I'm not a fan of Hersheys Kisses. I don't want to offend anyone who is, but I think they're horrible. Anyway, the idea is you buy your Hersheys Kiss for 1 cent, or you buy your Lindt chocolate for 15 cents. Nice and easy. What happens? 70% of people go for the Lindt chocolate because it's nicer. Now, that's fine. What happens though when we reduce the price? So the Hersheys Kiss is now free, and the Lindt chocolate, which was formerly at 15 cents, is also going to be reduced by 1 cent, so it's now 14 cents. So what happens? 70% of people go for the Hersheys Kiss instead. But the chocolate's the same. Surely if they just preferred it, they're both reduced by the same price. But no, the Hersheys Kiss is free. So the motivating factor of free is exponential. It's huge. But what's also interesting and is relevant to your question, the price impact difference from going from 1 cent to 2 cent is very marginal. From going from 14 cent to 15 cent is actually marginal. So it comes down to looking at equivalent games. Now the first rule is never, ever, ever put it at the minimum price on the App Store. Minimum price is 99 cents, I think. Now, think about what that means. If you put your game at 99 cents, that means that my game is worthless. I've only got enough faith in it to put it at the lowest price available. Why would you do that? Have you not got a good game? If you haven't got a good game, why are you putting it out? If you genuinely have a good game, though, you need to be able to stand up and say, with confidence, this game is worth more. Now, it's not worth a cup of coffee. It's not like that. This is a world of supply and demand, where there is more supply than we could ever humanly consume. The reason why we've gone to a freemium world in mobile, to a large part, I don't know, 92% or something, last time I saw a stat, is because, to a large part, we are in a world where substitution content is infinite. I can't play every game out there. If I'm going to choose between a free game and a charge game, the charge game has to set itself aside and higher than the others. Who has a problem paying $3.99 for Monument Valley? Anyone? I know I don't. I do not have a problem with that because Monument Valley is amazing. It's not a game. Oh, no, I didn't say that. So I have lots of funny things about whether it's a puzzle or a game, but I'm pedantic. It is amazing. That's all you need to hear. It's a fabulous experience. I'm happy to pay a premium amount for that. What about XCOM? Now, I actually have a few issues with XCOM, but that's because I think it's a bit slow in the way it handles turn-based. But actually, I can see why it was charging $9.99 or whatever. So, the question is, what class of game are we delivering? Is it bottom shelf 99 cents? Is it reasonably okay, but I'm not very confident, $1.99? Is it stupendous, $3.99? Or is it AAA phenomenal, $10.99 or $9.99, whatever? Now that's the difficult decision. So I can't tell you the price to put for your game. But if I'm going to have a $9.99 game on a mobile device, pay up front, then I'm going to want to see something that's going to make me feel like when I play, let's say, Destiny or The Witcher on console. Now, they're not going to be the same games. I'm not suggesting you have to have a game of the scale of those, but they have to have that pull to be a $9.99 game. That's the really tricky part. So you have to be careful. You have to think about the price and what it says to the audience about the experience. And this is the reason why free is even more interesting. Because at the point where you make a game free, if it is repeatable, if it can scale, then you need to know that it's going to do everything it can do. And that means that the freemium model becomes much more interesting, because we're no longer relying on the store to sell our game. Instead, we are the market store. We are selling our game, but we're not just selling the whole game, we're selling components within it. And at that point, an individual spending $10 is nothing. It becomes really significant when someone starts spending $100. My free-to-play game, I've got a price point of $4.99 for a prop that gives you an animation inside the game. Now, actually, you can unlock it over time anyway. Well, you can unlock a smaller version of it over time anyway. But I'm saying that thing's valuable. Now, I don't know whether that's going to work. We're going to find out. The point is that I'm not afraid to put goods like that inside a game that's repeatable, provided they can deliver utility and value. So, the only last thing I was going to add on this was you're saying a premium version of the game. Please tell me you're not having a premium version and a free version. Don't do it. Just don't do it. If you want to know why, please feel free to come and talk to me. Really, it's seriously, it's one of those sort of crazy things that I find that people try to do, and actually just damages the experience for everybody. So, so the question here was from W. Martin. The webinar is going to be available later. It's going to be recorded and it's going to be shared elsewhere. I don't have the details for that yet. It's going to be shared up by the Samsung guys on their developer site, presumably though. I'll be sending out links, so if you're following me, or if you're following, if you look at Samsung_dev, that Twitter handle should also give you access to the details for those guys as well. Next, so carrying on the conversation about the premium, a 2D side-scrolling Mario. So you've just basically described the thing I hate most in an indie pitch. I'm really sorry. I'm the worst person to give you advice for 2D side-scrolling Mario games. I hate them. I know that's unfair. I know that's my problem. But after... Well, I basically got bored of them in 1984 when I was using my Apple IIe and my Atari 2600. I know Mario is later than that. I know Mario is a perfect game, but in lots of people's minds, it never has done it for me personally. I love elements of it, which are genius, but there's so much of it. If you tell me it's pixelated, pixel graphics, I will cry, because I see 3 of those in every indie prize I judge. I see 3 of them, and I cry every time I see them. But I don't want to break your dreams, because there are lots of people who love them. So don't take my word for it. It is repeatable gameplay if you do it right, but you have to do it right. That means level design has to be really smart. And actually, if you are, to be fair, I have seen some 2D side-scrolling Mario games that massively delight me. I think it's Bad Bear. I'll try and dig out the details, but there's a really beautiful one which has, effectively, you're playing this evil bear, and he dies. And every time he dies, his corpse is left in the map and becomes part of the level. Oh my god, that's amazing! Because it's brilliantly implemented, and it's beautifully timed, and the jumps are perfect, and the art style is appropriate and gory and silly and hilarious all at the same time. Because although it's described as a 2D side-scrolling Mario game, it's not. It's a game which has had the designer's personality poured into it, and he's taken those parameters and made a beautiful experience that only he could make. if you've done that, you can charge for it. Because if you can get people to believe in that vision and be delighted by it, they will be amazed and they'll be really excited. And that's what we're talking about. Anticipation or expectation of future value. And then, because you still need that for a premium game, you still need the expectation of future value, or they won't buy. Getting a repeatable 2D game can be really, really interesting. It can be done by having user-generated content. It can be done by a whole bunch of other techniques. This method we described of like your corpses form part of the map. It can be done through speed runs. It can be done through alternate pathways. It can be done through crazy power-up mechanics. It can be done through different outfits which have different parameters. But you need to think about it in that way. Look at the difference between an endless runner and a sideways scrolling game. Can you bring those ideas together? I don't want to break your game. You know your game better than I do, but at least hopefully I've sort of stimulated some thoughts. So Mark's asking, what special considerations for freemium when your game target audience is young children and your revenue target is their parents? Oh, that's so difficult. So I think there are... It's very difficult. It's not the case that you can't do a freemium game for a child audience. But it is the case that you have to think about what it is you're selling. And the fact that you've got two audiences, the child and the parent is the gatekeeper for the child's money, changes everything. So, again, it's about focusing on utility. No one complains about Magic the Gathering for kids, because the parent can gift a booster pack. The booster pack is a joy to open and an excitement, and the kid can play. Fantastic. There's no end to the number of booster packs that the parent might give that child. And there's opportunities for them in a secondary market to do swapsies with other people. Fantastic. Now, if you're learning from that in the way you implement a freemium model, you're probably okay. Because the key factors there are appreciating the parent's role, allowing, and in fact, encouraging the parent to leverage your game as their reward system, but at the same time making sure that you're selling things which the parent understands. You know, they can understand a booster pack, they can't understand an energy power up which is gone in seconds. So you might want to avoid consumables, but you might use them as background in game mechanics, but just not charge for them. So, for example, you might have a capacity generator combo that you sell, but you don't sell the individual consumables. So that's the kind of thinking. It can change the way you perceive. Episodic ways of selling a game can be interesting, but they're problematic. They don't necessarily solve the problem here. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes with it. I'm very happy to email me and happily carry on the conversation, but there are a whole bunch of techniques. I mean, essentially, though, it's a lot easier not to do freemium for parents. But if you do freemium for parents, you need to make sure that the parents are very clearly communicated, and you want to keep it simple, and there's no point where the parent can't understand that the child is making a good choice. So next one is, when you get a free version, a paid version is so I don't know how long you've got for the economics lesson, but essentially what happens if you have a free version and a paid version. Now there's a caveat to this, but it's essentially a trial. A trial before you buy can work, but more often than not in games it's actually counterproductive. The reason is best exemplified by looking at some data. I can't remember what the URL is. I'll try and see if I can find it. Essentially, if you look at Xbox Live and their relationship between trailer only, trailer and demo, or demo only, what would you think would be the most successful? Most people think having a trailer and a demo would give you the best results, and it doesn't. Having a demo only, you think, yeah, that'll give you good results. No, that's the worst. Trailer only was significantly better. And the reason is that graph I showed you before. The expectation of delight is completely broken the moment you start playing the game without the incentive to carry on playing. So if you have a pay up front game, you've already invested the money, so you'll get past the pit of disillusionment and carry on playing. If, however, your first experience is capped hard, I've now got to re-engage my enthusiasm in order to go spend money in it to get that full game. And people don't do that, mostly. The game has to then be so exciting, and even then the proportion of people that they would get spending the money is capped at the level that they've managed to convert on the free one. So essentially it's a counterproductive strategy. Try before you buy didn't even work in the PC days. I remember back in the days when we were putting cover discs on PC magazines. Half the time they would help the game, half the time they would kill the game. There was no way of telling. Yes, having activity of some kind. A demo is better than nothing, but it's not as good as having an easy access, get people in and manage their experience and not cap them. As soon as you cap them, you hit a paywall. That paywall is capped at the level of excitement and engagement that they got at that point in time. The best example where it had worked was The Walking Dead Series 1. Series 1, Episode 1 was amazing. I had to know what happened to Clementine. I was emotionally connected to Clementine. But at the end of the day, I didn't buy Episode 3. I did buy Episode 2. But I was done. The engagement had diminished by the time. Later on, I got it was offered as a full bundle because I could see it was valuable. But it's a law of diminishing returns. So just moving on, and I think it's the last question. Oh, it's just it's just a thank you. So on that note, I think we're all done. I'm hoping you've got value out of that. If anyone has any further questions or thoughts for me, then you've got my contact details. Please feel free to reach out. If you're in San Francisco on the end of June, I'm going to be there for Pocket Gamer Connects. I'm going to be hosting the indie track, and I'm also going to be judging the big indie pitch there, which is always worthwhile getting involved if you're an indie developer. Show your game off to people like me and Mike Hines and people like Henry, and we'll give you the best feedback we can to make sure that you're best prepared for when you actually take that game to market. In case you're not aware, I'm also involved in a game called The Rocky Horror Show Touch Me. So I'm actually going through this process myself. So it's not just a case of me talking to you theoretically. I'm having to live through this myself, so I feel your pain. So obviously always happy to share information. Very interested to see what you think and whether the webinar was useful for you. And unless there's any other questions, I'm going to say thank you very much and close off. So thank you very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed it.